Today, we're looking at Robert Oster's Forest Green. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Robert Oster's Forest Green, as it sounds and as you would expect, is an orange ink. No, it's green. It's a nice green. It's a great green. Now, to make sure I have a range of experience with this inks, I do the writing samples. I put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Nemesign Singularity with a fine nib to take my notes for this video. But before we get to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately dunk it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And this is a complex color, which might explain why certain things go so well for this ink. Now we see this kind of peachy pink color across the bottom. We see some of the yellows, we see some greens, we see this very nice blue across the top. A lot of colors making up this particular green. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and the most notable thing about it is nothing. It is exactly the same as the one where I did it immediately. That means I don't expect this ink to take a whole lot to get out of your pen. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it would be to clean from your pens. I let my smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it performs rather well, better than would be expected seeing the other results. It didn't spread all over the place. It didn't feather all over the place. There's minor spreading, but so minor, it went from like an extra fine to a fine. Big deal. I can completely read it. I have confidence using this ink to take my notes if I had to highlight. This swab looks like camouflage. This is amazing ink. Water, with only 30 seconds, completely picks up, reactivates, and we start seeing a lot of the white of the paper coming through. That is great news for cleaning out your pens. Surprising that it did so well against the highlighter with that. Now, Pen Flush did everything that water did and nothing more, which means I shouldn't need Pen Flush to get this out of my pen. Water should be enough, but we'll test bleach anyway. It obliterates it, gone, like it wasn't there at all. Don't use bleach to get this out of your pen. You don't need it. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Robert Oster's Forest Green has a viscosity of 2.12, which makes it really just in there at normal. Fantastic. It is right there. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done with the extra fine and medium nib on Clairefontaine, Tumway River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Robert Oster's Forest Green has an average dry time of 12 seconds, which makes it a faster drying ink. Not fast, but faster. And when we look at where the viscosity and the dry time are falling, they're very close to each other on these bell curves, which is a very nice thing when they come close to each other. And we often see some interesting things happen with inks with that. Now, let's look at the writing sample. Exciting. I picked this ink up in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub. I use a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at that Clairefontaine paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 offers no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and crazy shading all over the place. Absolutely amazing amounts of shading from this ink. The extra fine starts out looking like a noticeably darker tone. It has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, crazy shade all over the place. 8 seconds to dry. Medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. The shading is nuts. It looks like it's camouflage. If you like camouflage, get this green. It's awesome. 14 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for the extra fine shows no color variation, and it lied because that extra fine has tons of it. And the medium shows us the color variation that we got in the writing. The smear test says we can likely recover it, sort of. Tomoe River. Other than the scrubby that looks like it's coming through or it's put on stupid thick, it has no bleeding. It does have ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread. It has halo in the darker areas, not the lighter areas. It has no sheen. It has nice shading with the 1.1. The extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Light shading throughout the writing. Light shading. Not tons of it. It's a noticeably darker tone, which makes some of it look like it goes away. The cream colored paper makes some of it look like it's not going to be there. There is a lovely shading through this writing on Tomoe River, and 13 seconds to dry. We go to the medium, we get no feather, no spread. We do get haloing, tons of haloing through the writing. We get no sheen. We do get some shading through the writing, not like we got on the Clairefontaine. But we do get some nice shading throughout this writing, so that's great. We get halo and shade with a medium on Tomoe River, and it only took 20 seconds to dry. Now we go to the scrubby, and the scrubby lies because a lot more ink goes down and it takes a little longer to dry, and then it levels out. The scrubby shows no color variation. We did get color variation in both of these writing samples, and the smear test says you can't recover it. Sorry, Bubba. Rhodia. Rhodia gives no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Look at that shading. It should be institutionalized because it's just crazy. It's amazing. Really nice. This is a great, great green. If I was to replace one of my favorite greens, I'd replace it with this because the shading that comes out from this ink is amazing. The extra fine. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Gone nuts with the shading again. Doing great. All over the place. I can't even point out where all of it is. Again, it's almost like it's camouflage. 7 seconds to dry. Medium, noticeably darker tone. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. And yes, while it's a noticeably darker tone as its normal tone throughout writing, it's funny because instead of shading darker, we get absolutely lighter areas. Ignoring where I put my thumb, the top of the is lighter. The ZY of lazy is much lighter. Parts of fox are much lighter. So we don't see it as much here. It's got to sort of, instead of getting darker in areas, it's got to show itself as getting lighter in areas, which is really neat. The extra fine and the medium scrubby both show us tons of variation. We get tons of variation. The smear test says we could likely recover this if we smeared it. So I wanted to look at this on yellow rhodia paper. It gave us no bleeding, no ghosting, as expected. But what happens to the tone of the ink? The medium got lighter. The extra fine and the 1.1 looked the same. So the yellow background affected the medium where it's thicker. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and that yellow paper did not disrupt its ability to shade. It did fantastic. Great shading all the way through the 1.1. It's exciting to look at. I like this. Extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and yes, shading please. I want camouflage pants just because of this ink. 7 seconds to dry. Now when we go to the medium, that yellow tone paper really affected its ability to shade. It really ate up it's trying to be lighter. It has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, and we lost the shading with the medium on yellow paper. 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine showed us color variation. We got color variation. The scrubby of the medium showed us none. We didn't get any. And the smear test says you can likely still recover it. So this shaded so well, I wanted to make it suffer. Why not? So I tested it on 28 pound premium copy paper. And with the medium, we do see some bleeding. It's definitely absorbed quite a bit in. It's not bleeding through on the extra fine. We see show through. I don't worry about the scrubby. So the medium gives us a little bit of spread. It gives us feathering throughout. A lot of little feathering. I wouldn't want to use this on the copier papers for that reason. Not with a medium. Extra fine. I'm sorry, the medium at the top had no halo, sheen, or shade. The extra fine, it offered no real spread. It is a slight bit thicker, but it's no real spread. It didn't make its way up, 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 like we see sometimes, like we're going to see. It does have little bits of feathering.
I wouldn't see this as distracting that would stop me from using it. You can still read it perfectly fine, and people that are not fountain pen people aren't even going to see it. Only fountain pen people are going to see any of the feathering that occurs on this. It had no halo, no sheen, no shade. It only took 1 second to dry. The scrubby showed us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation with the extra fine. And the smear test, with only 1 second to dry, it couldn't smear. So 20-pound copier paper. And it bled a lot. And you can practically read it through. It has, the show through doesn't even matter because it bleeds through so much. The top's written with a medium. It has feather, it has spread, it has no halo, it has no sheen, it has no shade. I wouldn't want to use this ink in a medium on 20-pound copier paper. The extra fine has feather, has spread, has no halo, no sheen, no shade, 1 second to dry. The truth is, on a copier paper, this ink looks uninteresting. 1 second to dry for that extra fine. The scrubby showed us no color variation. We didn't get any color variation. And the smear test, you wouldn't smear it if you smeared on this paper. It just goes straight in like a sponge. And that's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Robert Oster's Forest Green, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I do like red inks with green inks, and that's what I chose, but I wanted a red ink that was straightforward. Just red, because I don't want it to detract from, only be very nicely there. I chose Noodler's Tiananman Red. Fantastic together. Truly. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Robert Oster's Forest Green? I think it gives great, amazing shading in almost every nib on almost every paper. Cheap paper, not so much. Everything else, fantastic. This ink is everything good about green inks. It gives great shading, and you get wildly different tones depending on what nib and flow of pen you choose. Just a joy to use. Thanks for watching.